Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Meiser Sheni, Pede Gimel, Halacha Aleph, and Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Chav Gimel. We left off on Daf Chav Beis, Amid Beis, by the two dots, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Now, in Halacha Aleph, the Mishnah differentiated between someone asking his fellow to help him carry up his produce from outside Yerushalayim into Yerushalayim, but he uses the words ha'al es haperos ha'elu liYerushalayim lachalek, so that when we get there, we will divide in the produce. That expression is understood that he's going to be paying him for his work, which is prohibited because one may not pay down one's debts with Meiser Sheni produce/money. So that's prohibited. But what one could say is ha'alem shenoichlem or and v'shenishtem b'Yerushalayim. When we get there, we will eat together. That's understood to be a favor for a favor, and that will be permitted. We're going to have until Halacha Beis various inquiries, and one of them, at least at the end, will be resolved. Halacha Beis will bring to us a machlokes between the Chachamim and Rab Shimon, and this is opening up a huge topic, whether one is allowed to use Ma'is Meiser Sheni to buy Truma. Obviously, we're speaking about a kohen, or maybe even if it's not a kohen. Don't forget, I'm allowed to give to you my Meiser Sheni money. So if I have a chaver, a relative who's a kohen, whether I'm allowed to spend Meiser Sheni money to buy Truma. What would be the issue with that? We're talking about Truma food. So really, two different expressions that will be part of today's daf. The Chachamim say you cannot. Rab Shimon says you are allowed to. Let me use one expression. This is the machlokes, whether mevi'in or ein mevi'in, kachim lebeis apsul, or mipnei shemama'et ba'achilosei. We'll break that down in the Gemara. In other words, don't forget, guys, Truma, just by the fact that only Kohanim can eat it, when you use Meiser Sheni money to buy Truma, you are limiting those who can eat it. And the concept of you're bringing it lebeis apsul, you make it subject to certain types of impurities that Meiser Sheni per se would not be subject to. As just one example, a tful yoim, someone who was tummy, they went to the mikveh, but it's not dark yet, it's not night yet, that person cannot eat Truma. That person will contaminate Truma if they touch it. That's the first Mishnah in Brachas. That's Truma. Meiser Sheni is holy, but it's on a lower madrega, it's on a lower notch, and a Tful Yoim cannot be metame, will not be metame Meiser Sheni. So when you make Meiser Sheni into Truma, you're making it more subject to Truma, which means you might invalidate it. And if you would have used it to buy stam food, then it would not have become invalidated if in the future Tzvul Yoim will touch it. Again, machlokes, Chachamim and Rab Shimon. We're going to have in the Gemara, just a word of introduction, a question, a machlokes Amoraim, whether the Chachamim and Rab Shimon will argue in a similar case, which will be whether one can use Meiser Sheni money to buy Shvi'is produce. Shvi'is produce is also more limited. You can only eat it until this man biur. And then we'll speak out more limitations. Meiser Sheni has no such limitations. There is a limitation with Meiser Sheni. You should be eating it Shana Shana. You should be eating it. There's twice in the cycle of 7 years, you have the Biur HaMaisris. But if I'm buying a produce on the Shvi'is year, I'm buying something that its Zman HaBir will be in 2 weeks, then I'm limiting it. Again, you can argue, just like there's a machlokes regarding Truma, the same as by Shvi'is or not. That will be more or less today's daf. But coming back, we're in daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. We fell a little bit behind. I want to try to learn a little bit quicker. So again, based on the second case in the Mishnah, where you don't use the word lachalik, you just say, come help me, and we will eat together, which the Mishnah says you are allowed to do it, because it's one giving one a gift of helping them schlep. The other one is giving the first guy a gift by sharing a meal. Now the question is, what were to happen if he used initially the right expression? He did not say the word lachalek, but once the person already hit Yerushalayim, once the person finished the job, what happens if now he were to add the word lachalek? Oh, shkoyach, now I'm going to keep my part. But how does he word it? Toil chelkecha va'ani chelki. Take your part, I'll take my part. Beautiful. So do we say that now that he said use the words chelek, that revealed retroactively that his intention was always the lachalek option? He meant lachalek, which would mean that it will be prohibited for the schlepper to take anything. Or do we say, no, when I asked you, I knew the Mishnah, it's not a choiv, it's a favor for a favor. Now I'm stop saying I wanna fulfill my obligation. So why didn't you take your part? Gavaldik. No answer. First question. Question number 2. Without using the words lachalek prior to carrying it, our Mishnah spoke about, let's say I have oranges, and I'm asking you, can you help me take the oranges in Yerushalmi? I'll eat together. Mutter. What happens if I tell you, toil chav yishal yayin zu, please help me carry, just as an example, a barrel of this wine. And when we get there, I'll share. I don't say lachalek. We'll have my oil together. Now, why would this be different? So I want to say the following. When you have 2 items, you're carrying wine, and I'm going to give you oil, 2 items already smells like a barter, like a commercial transaction. Don't forget, guys, the moment we view it as a transaction, not as a favor, it's prohibited. He didn't say the words lachalik, emes, but maybe if it's 2 items, that in itself would lend this favor to no longer be a favor. It leans more to the side of, you do one thing and I'm going to pay you with something else. Or not. Now, it's amazing what the Gemara does. There's a little nuance that we'll pick up on. There's a presumption in the Gemara which will stand that the same prohibition that we have when it comes to Meiser Sheni, the same will be with Meiser Behema. Guys, don't forget that when I have Meiser Behema, I have to take it to the Beis HaMikdash, but it's like a carbon shlamim, which means I will get my part of the animal after it's slaughtered, and after the Mizbeach gets, after the Kohanim get. I am not allowed to use my meat of this kachim for any commercial purpose, including for paying a debt. So now the question is, I am outside I'm outside the Yerushalayim. Kevin is asking, no one is obligated. What was going to happen with, I am asking you, the behema that I have for Meiser behema, I don't know how to deal with behemoths. You think about it, you think we know how to handle a behema? It's going to be funny to watch. We'll have to get used to it. So if I tell someone who lahavdil Nebuch has a dog as a pet, so he knows lahavdil, he knows how to deal with an animal. So I tell the dog owner, do me a favor, you know how to deal with behemoths. Can you help me take my Meiser behema up? And when we come to Yerushalayim, same thing. You're going to eat with me the shlamim. You're going to eat with me the meat. He doesn't say the words lachalik. Now, the Gemara is going on the premise, if he says lachalik, it's usher. Why is it usher? Because you're helping me schlep my living animal, and lachalik, which would mean I'm paying you. You can't do that. You can't use meiser behema to pay. If I don't use the word lachalik, it's mutter. But now that we introduced that maybe when it comes to yayin shemen, 2 items, even if you don't use the word lachalik, 2 items already feels more like a commercial transactions, one thing for something else, a barter, a living animal, and geschachtene meat might also be viewed as 2 items. It's not wine and oil. It's so deep this. It's not wine and oil, but a living animal and a steak is maybe not the same thing. Or not. No, it's wine and wine. Young wine, old wine. That's the Gemara's kasha. After Ma'aseh Behema Kain, we have the same kasha. Again, not using the words lachalik. Help me carry it, and I'll give you the slaughtered meat from the kachim after it was given back to me, and I don't use the word lachalik. Maybe that will also be usher. Why? Because it's 2 different items. So now the Gemara just says the following. We're making a comparison between Ma'aseh Sheni and Meiser Behema, Daf Chav Gimel. So says the Gemara that I want you to know that Lav Dafke, Meiser Sheni and Meiser Behema travel together. Why not? Why are they different? How are they different? Meiser Sheni, Al Yidesha Michirase Miyuchedes. Look inside the top Maharaful, they're interesting. The only prohibition on Meiser Sheni is only to sell it, which is emes, only to make a transaction with it. But the Torah allows you to redeem it. That's the whole Torah. There's a lot of leniencies by Meiser Sheni. Pidyoinoi normally would mean from the original onto money. Chilul means from the money back onto food. So Bechlal, since it could be exchange, when it comes to all of our inquiries, we can be lenient by Meiser Sheni. Aval, I'm reading inside the Manafulda. Aval Meiser Behema, she'ein mechirasa miyuchedes, that the problem, the restriction regarding kachim, this is not only Meiser Behema, but this is also Meiser Behema, isn't only you can't sell an animal that was designated as kachim. No, you can't be paid to it. An animal that's unblemished cannot be redeemed. There's no concept of chilul, of course not. No, there's many more restrictions. I'm back in the Gemara. Meiser Sheni al yedei shemichirasi miyuchedes, only the mechiras asur. So it's possible regarding the inquiries that we had, that we just learned. We had two inquiries by Meiser Sheni, and then a third one by Meiser Behema at Amar Mutar. But maybe Meiser Behema will be asur. Al yedei she'ein mechirasi miyuchedes harei at Amar asur. Now, I want to make it clear, the Gemara says, I am not telling you, says the Gemara, that we should be lenient by Meiser Sheni. I'm not saying that. Leis pshitolach tehi mutter. Regarding the first two inquiries, it's not that we're trying to imply that since Meiser Behema, since Meiser Sheni is only, its prohibition, the restriction is only regarding sale, not pidyon, not chilul, vaday mutter. No, we're not saying that. We don't know that. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, the third inquiry, which we asked by Meiser Behema, let's ask the third inquiry by Meiser Sheni. What's the third inquiry? I'm not using the words lachalek. Wine to oil, the Gemara says, I don't know the answer. But what about slaughtered meat, living meat? Is it considered two minim? The Gemara only asked that question by Meiser Behema. So says the Gemara, if you were to ask this question by Meiser Sheni, here I'll tell you that it will be allowed. We could be lenient. Beautiful liner. Regarding Meiser Sheni. Now, what will be an example of Meiser Sheni? A person has an animal that's Meiser Sheni. How did that happen, Aviv? So we learned about this. Outside Yerushalmi, you're not supposed to use Meiser Sheni to buy a behema. But what were to happen if in Yerushalmi you bought an animal with Meiser Sheni? Just as an example. Lebasar Taiva, we're not talking about kachim. Or you bought a chaya, even better, not even shayach to use a chaya for the mizbeach. Basar Taiva. And these animals went out of Yerushalmi, and now you're bringing it back. And what are you telling the shlepper? How behema b'chayazu? And when we come to Yerushalmi, here, by the way, it doesn't matter whether he's telling him, I'm going to give you from its meat, or whether he's telling him, I'll give you from the steak I have in my freezer. It's not the point. It's meat for meat. It's the same min, but the meat that he's carrying is living. What he's telling him he'll share is already slaughtered. Do we say it's considered one min or two minim? For this, the Gemara says, because Meiser Sheni, that mechirase miyuchades, we're more lenient, here you will be allowed to. The way we're going to learn pshat in the Gemara, that will be permitted. In other words, we have three inquiries. The first two by Meiser Sheni, the Gemara wants to make it clear that we're not saying that mutter. We don't know. The third inquiry by Meiser Behema, we don't know. But if you were to ask the third inquiry, Benegeya Meiser Sheni, I do know the answer. Because of Meiser Sheni being something that's only restricted for sale, that we are allowed to make pidyon and allowed to make chilul, I will be lenient. If I don't use the word lachalek, I am allowed to tell you, help me carry my animal and I'll give you steak because it's considered one min. Now, yayin v'shemen, I don't know. Atkan halacha aleph. Okay, chavra, moving on. Halacha beis, Mishnah beis. This is a shas sugya. This is not only concerning Meiser Sheni, as we'll see in the Gemara. And it's beautiful. Here's one topic, much bigger than one topic. Says the Mishnah that ein loikchin truma bekesav Meiser Sheni. Chachamim say, let's say I'm a kohen, or I have a friend who's a kohen. Makes no difference. I'll just give the example, I'm a kohen. And I have my Sheni money. I have to spend it, Iran, on food. I'm allowed to eat truma. Just for the record, we kept on learning this. Truma is cheaper. Just to know, since less people can buy truma, truma's cheaper. I'm going to get more bang for my buck as a kohen if I use my money to buy truma. I'll get more food. Can I buy truma with it? And you would think, why not? So here's the why not. Why not? Because since truma has more restrictions than Meiser Sheni, and I'll tell you two restrictions. Number one, less people can eat it. Only kohanim can eat it. Meiser Sheni money, of course, no one can steal from me of it. But if I have produce, like I can invite, everyone can eat it. So I'm limiting its eaters. Another difference between Truma and Meiser Sheni, even though Meiser Sheni is holy, if you remember Chevra, the third Perek and Chagiga, right? There's different levels to Tuma and Tara. The holier something is, the more sensitive it is, and it can become Tameh easier. The specific here will be if someone was Tameh and they went to the mikvah, but it's not yet night. That person is called a Tful Yom. They already went to the mikvah, but there isn't yet Tzei Sakei Chavim. That person will be Matame Truma. That person will not be Matama Meiser Sheni. That person may, if I am the person, I'm not allowed to eat Truma. I have to wait until Tzei Sakei Chavim. I am allowed to eat Meiser Sheni, even though before going to the mikvah, I'm not allowed to eat Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni is holy, but a Tful Yom cannot be Matame it. So imagine, if I buy Meiser Sheni, this Meiser Sheni is less subject to becoming Tameh. If I buy Truma, I'm not saying it will become Tameh, but if a Tful Yom touched it, so the Meiser Sheni Shaboy will not become Tameh, but the Truma Shaboy will become Tameh. So I'm bringing the food into a scenario where it might become invalidated. It might not become invalidated. And that's the big topic, whether Mivian Kachim Lebeis Hapsul or Ein Mivian Kachim Lebeis Hapsul. You're not allowed to bring something holy into a position where it might become invalidated. Machloikas Chachamim and Abshimon. So the Chachamim say no. Now the words in our Mishnah is not Mipnei Shemiviim L'dei Psul, as we'll have in the Gemara a Braisa quoting that expression. In our Mishnah, the Iker is Mipnei Shuhu Mama'id Ba'achilose. Look inside the Marafulda. Mama'id Ba'achilose includes two things. Number one, Shahatruma Asura L'tful Yom. So if you have people that are Tful Yoms, if I would have bought Chulin food, Stam food, which now will become imbued with Kedushas Meiser Sheni, even the Tful Yoms could eat it. If I'm going to buy Truma, the Tful Yoms cannot eat it, so less people can eat it. It's about eaters. Another thing says the Maraful is Zarim. If you're not a Kohen, you can't eat it. So, and therefore, you can't take something that could have been consumed by more and use it in a way where it can now it can only be consumed by less eaters, by less people. Rab Shimon mater. Why is Rab Shimon mater? We're limiting it. Look inside again the Marafol. The Sfira lay because Rab Shimon holds muter lavi kachim lebeis hapsul. There's no such restriction. Don't forget, you're not making it a problem. I'm a kohen. I'm going to eat it. It's my money. My sasheni. Let's go with Rav Meir. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, even according to Rav Meir, that it's mama in Gavoya, but God gave me the right to buy an apple or an orange. So why can't I buy truma? And again, I think the upside of buying truma is because you're going to get more food, and I will eat it, and I'm not a tful yom, and I'll make sure a tful yom doesn't touch it. That's Rav Shimon. Okay, so now there's a back and forth between these two Tanoim, Chachamim and Rav Shimon. Amalahem, Rav Shimon says the Mishnah, I will prove to you that we don't have an issue when it comes to Meiser Sheni that you're diminishing those who can eat it. Who cares if you're Mamayid Ba'achilose? What's his great raya? Remember, we learned the ideal way of using Meiser Sheni Aviv is to buy shlamim. Think about shlamim. Kachim. Im hekel bezivchei shlamim. Hekel means the Torah is lenient, allowing the person who has Meiser Sheni money to use it to buy shlamim. Now, shlamim is subject to becoming tamei much more than Meiser Sheni. Where do we find that? Pigul. Machsheves chutz lizman. Noisar actually leaving it chutz lizman. And tamei Let me go to Tuma. Guys, I know that at Tful Yom, first of all, Tful Yom cannot be Metame Meiser Sheni. Tful Yom is going to be Metame Shlamim. I'll tell you another detail, as we know, that how far down the chain does an item still have the power to impart Tuma? By Kachim all the way up on Aravi. Much further. And by Meiser Sheni, like by Chulin, Sheni is the end of the line. So you're allowed to buy Shlamim. Less people can eat it. The Tful Yom cannot eat it. You're making it more subject to Tuma. Nevertheless, you're supposed to buy your carbon. So therefore, says Rab Shimon, Akal v'chaymer is loy nakel betruma. Truma is even less than kachim. Why? Truma is not subject to pigul. Truma is not subject to noiser. And Truma, even though Truma is subject to a Tuma from a Tful Yom, Truma doesn't go until a Revi. So it's better. That's great, right? That's a good raya. So says the Mishnah, no. Amrullah answers the Chachamim to Rab Shimon, Mo im hekel bezivchei shlamim. There's one difference. You're right. Pigul, noiser, Tuma. The Revi. But by shlamim, the meat that's given back to the owner is not limited to kohanim, mutarim lezarim. At least that part. Great. Even a zar can eat it. I can bring a kar shlamim and I can eat it. Okay, that is good. Shekei, knuckle betrumos. From there, you don't have a kal v'chaymer. Exactly. There's chumras, there's skulas. Shekei knuckle betruma. Shehi asura lezarim. Now you're trying to think. So what's behind this Chachamim and Rab Shimon?
No, but clearly you're able to limit Meiser Sheni by the fact that you could purchase a shlamim. So if you're able to limit it, why should?
Okay. Let me word it like this: when I buy a carbon, am I vadai diminishing its eaters? No, I'm not. I'm creating a possibility. It's more sensitive to pigul noiser and tuma. But if it won't become pigul, Danny, if it won't become noiser, if it won't become tamei, so then I didn't limit.
You're definitely limiting the amount of time it could be consumed on.
That's something that for some reason the Mishnah doesn't mention. But let me just go to what the Mishnah does mention. Masha Enken, when it comes to truma, vada, you're limiting it. I think that's what the Chachamim are saying. Not, in other words, truma is asur lezarim. So I can allow using it for kachim because I might not be limiting it. And even with what Danny is mentioning, this man, you have only 2 days and 1 night, but if I'm going to eat it during those 2 days and 1 night, it will not become puzzle. It's not certain that it's going to become invalidated. It will not certain become, and anyone can eat it with me. All of my chavedim, kahanim levim Yisraelim. When I buy truma, vada, you're limiting it. That's much worse. Okay, says the Gemara. Now here's amazing. Again, our Mishnah's wording in the Chachamim is, why are you not allowed to buy truma? Mipnei shuhu mema'et ba'achilosei. Says the Gemara Shkoyach, in a Braisa, there's another version of the words of the Chachamim. And there the words are shelo yavoi lidei psul, which you can argue generally means the same, but it's not the same. You're making it more subject to invalidation. Says the Gemara, first of all, what's the meaning of mahu lidei psul? Invalidation. We're not focusing on the zarim versus kohanim. Amar Rabbi Yoina, the words of the Braisa is focusing on shenifsal b'tful yoim. Like we mentioned, if it's going to be touched by a tful yoim, I'm not talking about whether a tful yoim can eat it. The Mishnah is speaking about whether a tful yoim can eat it. Also, we're speaking about eating. The Braisa is not focusing on eaters. Will it become invalidated? If a tful yoim touches ma'aser sheni, it's not tamei. If a tful yoim touches truma, it becomes tamei. Okay. So says the Gemara, lo achloi. Now another detail, which is also amazing. You know, or just to give a counter. Hold on. Let me ask you a question, Aviv. What happens with ma'aser sheni if it becomes tamei? You get to redeem it. I know we mentioned it. We never learned the Mishnah about this. If ma'aser sheni becomes tamei, even in Yerushalmi, you redeem it, which is fine. So then the food becomes chulin. Chulin can be eaten b'tuma. The money becomes holy. If Truma, if Meiser Sheni was used to buy Truma and a Tful Yoim touches it, can you redeem it? Let me tell you something. If you can redeem it, then who cares if a Tful Yoim touches it? It's not going to become puzzle. But you cannot redeem it. Why can you not redeem it if a Tful Yoim touches it? Because Truma is not subject to redemption. Meiser Sheni is subject to redemption. The Meiser Sheni in this food did not even become Tameh when a Tful Yoim touched it. Only the Truma Shabai was subject to absorbing the Truma. Truma is unredeemable. In other words, if you're going to buy Meiser Sheni Truma, let's focus on the Psul, not on the eaters, but it becomes completely invalidated. What happens if a Tful Yoim touches it? Because you Tameh Dvar Torah, just for the record. Tful Yoim is Matameh Truma, Mideh Oiraisa, Chav Gimel Amid Beis. But hold on.
What if someone redeemed already the Meiser Sheni, have the money, and a Tful Yoim touch the money?
No, Tful Yoim cannot be Matami Meiser Sheni. Simple, Shleim.
Will not. You can't make money Tameh. What are you talking about?
Doesn't matter.
He wants to redeem it for Truma.
You didn't buy it. If it's not Truma yet, if there's no Kedushas Truma, Meiser Sheni is not subject to Truma. You're asking a bigger question. Can money B'chlal become Tameh? People say money is inherently Tameh. Give me your money. I'm fine. For me, money is stud. Okay, anyways. This is a good rechab. So 1 second. So what if it became Tameh? You can redeem Meiser Sheni. No, you can't. Why? Why can't you? Because that which is allowed to be Meiser Sheni is redeemable. Truma is not redeemable. The Meiser Sheni is not Tameh. Shu Toir Dvar Torah. The Meiser Sheni Shaboy is taught. What became Tameh in it? The Truma. Truma cannot be redeemed. So Have, that's the meaning of the Braisa. Shelo Yavel L'Dei Psul. Okay, beautiful. Now.
But isn't whatever you buy, it has Truma in the end, Meiser Sheni.
If you buy Meiser Sheni, if you buy Truma, then it has two Kedushas, Meiser Sheni and Truma. It will become subject to a Tful Yoim's Truma because of the Truma in it. Can't redeem it because if Meiser Sheni would be Tameh, you could redeem it. People are, no, the question is, now that it's Tameh, Meiser Sheni could be redeemed. The answer is, even though it's Tameh, it's not Tameh because of Meiser Sheni. As far as the Meiser Sheni is concerned, it will never become Tameh. It's only a Tful Yoim. Why is it Tameh? Because of Truma. Truma cannot be redeemed. You can't redeem it.
Okay. Oh, so the bottom line is you wouldn't be able to redeem it.
You would have to get it, destroy it, and therefore don't. Now, when I buy Truma, did it become Tameh? Was it touched with a Tful Yoim? No, but I'm opening it. I'm opening up a possibility to making it puzzle. When you didn't buy Truma with it, that possibility does not exist. Now you're making it more vulnerable. Don't even make it more vulnerable. So that's the Braisa's meaning of Shelo Yavel L'Dei Psul. Continues the Gemara. Our Mishnah uses another expression. Mao Mamaid Ba'achi Lasai. Don't focus on it becoming invalidated. Focus on less people can eat it. That we read the Mara Fulda. He's just going in the opposite order of the Mara Fulda. I don't know why the Mara Fulda changed the Seder of the Gemara. Truma Asura Lizarim. Meiser Sheni Mutar Lizarim. Truma is asura bit Tful Yoim. Forget about it becoming Tameh. A Tful Yoim may not eat Truma. Meiser Sheni may be consumed by a Tful Yoim. Now, there's one thing that the Gemara has to point out over here. If I use Meiser Sheni to buy Truma, let me go with the Mishnah, and you are Mema'et Ba'achi Lasoi, what are we focusing on? We're focusing on that the Meiser Sheni is now, it has less people that can eat it. We're focusing on what you did to the Meiser Sheni. So to say, you limited the Meiser Sheni. Let me ask you, Aviv, there's another issue. Don't focus on the Meiser Sheni, focus on the Truma. Let me give you a focus on the Truma. Truma, before you buying it with Meiser Sheni money, is that Truma bound to Yerushalmi? No, it can be taken anywhere. If you're buying it with Meiser Sheni, you're limiting the Truma. Why didn't the Mishnah also say that? That's the Gemara's kasha. Asks the Gemara, as a kasha. Let's go with our Mishnah. If we're focusing on the problem, that we don't want to take something that's holy and limit its eaters, its consumers, I got the Ma'aser Sheni part, Zorim, Tful Yoim, but there is another part. Why are we not looking at that? Which is, Kshem Shumaid Ba'achi Losso. I'm sorry, Kshem Shumaid Ba'achi Lossoi, that's referring to Ma'aser Sheni B'Lashon Zacher. Truma is B'Lashon Akeva. Kachu Mamaid Ba'achi Losso, for example, Truma, listen to this, guys, is allowed to be eaten by an oinen. Believe it or not, even though it's a holier. Ma'aser Sheni is not allowed to be eaten by an oinen. Lo yachalti ba'oini mimenu. Beferish. So less people. So you have an oinon, there was truma. If you wouldn't have used Ma'aser Sheni money to buy the truma, the oinen would be allowed to eat the truma. If you buy it with Ma'aser Sheni, the oinanim cannot eat it. Another thing, truma can be eaten anywhere. Eino tu'una mechitza, meaning it's not bound to be consumed in the walls of Yerushalmi and HaKodesh. Ma'aser Sheni is toon mechitza. So in other words, it's a kasha. Our Mishnah that's focusing on the miut ba'achilasai, why did it only focus on what you are ruining, the ruining of the Ma'aser Sheni, the limiting of the Ma'aser Sheni? You're also limiting the truma. Now, we're not going against the Chachamim, we're just asking why didn't they also mention it? And the Gemara says they did. You know what? Ashkach Tani, we found the Baraisa, that actually that was the Girsa in the Baraisa. That what? Easy way out. Bottom line is, there are three Girsois b'shitas Chachamim. Mamayid ba'achi lasoi, mevim, because you're shemevim l'dei psul, and now mamayid ba'achi lasoi and uba'achi laso. And the beauty is that for all of this, Rab Shimon holds, I don't have a problem. I don't mind that you're mamayid ba'achi lasoi. I don't mind that it's mevim l'dei psul. Doesn't matter. You are buying food, and you're going to eat it, and everything, shalom al yisrael. You're not ruining it. You're going to end up eating it. Don't become tummy. Don't allow Tvul Yom to touch it. Don't take it out of Mechitzas Yerushalayim. Now the Gemara is going to go, and we're going to bring the same topic of the Mishnah to whether one, Aviv, can use Ma'aser Sheni money and buy produce of Shvi'is. Now, don't forget that produce of Shvi'is has its own restrictions. It cannot be taken outside the Holy Land, normally. Well, Ma'aser Sheni cannot even be taken out of Yerushalayim, so you're not limiting it. But produce of Shvi'is has a shelf life, a halachic shelf life. When that item is no longer found in the fields to be eaten in your Medina, the Holy Land has 3 Medinas, not 1 Medina. Imagine how much 1 Medina machta balagan. Sholish Medinos. So, if you're going to buy Shvi'is produce with Ma'aser Sheni, you are also limiting it. What are you limiting it with? With the time that you can eat it. So Tani, we learned in a Braisa, indeed, that ein loichen Shvi'is bekesev Ma'aser. Now, I want to add a little nuance. The meviim l'dei psul cannot be used by Shvi'is. There's nothing in which Shvi'is is more subject to psul more than Ma'aser Sheni. There's no pigul, there's no noiser. It's less holy than Ma'aser Sheni vis-a-vis. A Tful Yoim is not matame Shvi'is. A person who's tame is allowed to eat Peder Shvi'is. So, but the focus of our Mishnah, the focus of this last Braisa that we brought, that L'chachamim, it's both. You can say it's both, but the focus is on you're being mama'id ba'achi lasoi. That logic you have by Shvi'is. You can't eat. There's no Zman Biur for Ma'aser Sheni. There's a Zman Biur for Shvi'is. That's great. So first of all, we found a Braisa. The Braisa says explicitly, you're not allowed to use Ma'aser Sheni to buy produce of Shvi'is. Why? Because, it doesn't say why. We know why. Because you're Mamayid Ba'achi Lasei. Now, hold on. Rab Shimon in our Mishnah says you are allowed to buy Truma. Will Rab Shimon argue with the Chachamim of that Braisa? That's subject to a machlokes between Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yoina. Beautiful. Says the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yosi. Zok Rabbi Yosi. That just like we have in our Mishnah, Rab Shimon, who's lenient, using the words that we read in the Maraf Fulda, Rab Shimon holds that mevian kachim lebeis absul. No problem. You're not, just don't make it tamei. Don't make it pigul. You can buy it. So, b'machloikes. B'machloikes means, even though the Baraisa did not quote Rab Shimon, now that we know Rab Shimon from the Mishnah, it's self-understood. It's the same thing. Mamayid ba'achilasei by Truma is something that Rab Shimon rejects. So Rab Shimon will reject this Braisa, Rab Shimon will hold that you are allowed to purchase Shvi'is with Mois, Maiser Sheni, which makes sense. The Chiddush is the Amayra Rabbi Yoina, Amar Rabbi Yoina, na, Divrei HaKol Hi. And you know why? First of all, if Rab Shimon would have argued with the Tanakama, why wouldn't the Braisa bring Shitas Rab Shimon? That's a great proof. That's why Rabbi Yoina, I think, is trying to push it. That don't compare one case to the other. Now the question is, why not? What will be the logic? So he says like this, that the only restriction that you were to have by Shvi'is is that there is less time to eat it. Okay? So he says the only restriction of Truma is, like we said in the Mishnah, because less people can eat it. Who eats Truma? Kohanim. Who eats Shvi'is? Anyone. He says, Rabbi Yoina says, that Rab Shimon holds, since Oichle Truma Zirizin, this is a general rule by Kohanim, they're diligent, they know how to safeguard things. So therefore, he doesn't consider it a risk by the fact that you're making it into Truma. We know that it's going to be protected from the Tful Yom. And who cares if Zarim cannot eat it? The Kohen will eat it up. Masha'en came when it comes to Shvi'is may be consumed by anyone. Not anyone is a Zaris. If you're going to buy Shvi'is, you might not be diligent. You might keep it on your shelf too long. Mitamol it's Zman Biur. And you didn't stop. Maiser Sheni is not bound by Zman Biur, but the Pedus of Shvi'is is. So that's great. Says the Gemara, and that will be a challenge that we will have. A challenge that we will have on Shitas Rabbi Yoina. Again, that holds that Rab Shimon will agree by Shvi'is. Chosev Rabbi Chananya Kumei Rav Mona. Now listen to this, my friends. We are going now to our Mishnah in Masechtas Pesachim. In the Bavli, Daf Tzadik Ches. We learned the following in the Mishnah. And before I read it inside, let me just share a couple of review halachas. We have in Shlamim many subcategories. And for those of us who theoretically read it every day, we're familiar with it. So you have the general Shlamim, what we just had last week in the Parsha by Toida. Toida is a subcategory of Shlamim. Everyone has a little nuance, right? Normally Shlamim may be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Carbon Toida may only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night. That's explicit, we read in the Parsha. Let's go right now, my friends, to a Bechar. A Bechar is a category of a Shlamim. For the record, a Bechar belongs to the Kohanim. Pesach is another category of Shlamim. Let me just share, where is Bechar and Pesach the same? When it comes to the avoida of Zrikas Hadam. Generally, when it comes to Karbanos, Zrikas Hadam will be Shtayim Shehin Arba. Right? Chatos is Bechal different. The Chatos, you have to bring it on top. Chatos, you have to Lachatchila do the 4 Karanos. But by a Karban Pesach and by a Karban Bechar, we're speaking about a Bechar that's not blemished. Lachatchila, you make 1 Zrika. That's enough. Where does Pesach and Bechar differ regarding how long they may be eaten? Both of them are not like your... no, I take it back. Pesach is the most restricted, more than a Karban Toida. Pesach can only be eaten for that night. And what do the Chachamim say? Only until midnight. You eat the Karban Pesach, it's a Shlamim. And I'll tell you, it's even worse, because when you shech the Karban Pesach, no one eats it on the day. You don't eat it during the day. You have to shech it during the day. You only eat Karban Pesach in the middle of your Seder. You only eat it at night. And you have to finish at midnight. That's by Pesach. Another detail regarding Pesach that makes it unique is that unlike a Shlamim that we just learned, I am allowed to share my Shlamim with anyone that I want. Yes, it's Kachay Kalim, it has to be eaten in Nechitzos Yerushalmi, but it's not bound to anyone. Karban Pesach may only be consumed by those who were counted as the people that will be eating it before they shechted it. If not, they're not allowed to partake of the Karban Pesach. You got that, Aviv? So again, the Zrikas Hadam by a Pesach and the Bechar are the same. But when it comes to eating it, there are 2 restrictions that Pesach is even more chomer than everything, certainly of a Bechar. Number 1, it can only be eaten for its Menuim. And number 2, it's only eaten until Chatzos. A Bechar, a Bechar can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. A Bechor is more limited than the Pesach. A Pesach, if you were Manoi, you can be a Yisrael. All the Yidden are obligated to eat a Pesach. A Bechor may only be eaten by Kohanim. So its rules of consumption are very different. Each one has a restriction over the other. But the Maila is that the Avoida up until eating is the same. And therefore, what does that lead us? Because there's a whole sugya of what were to happen if animals gets mixed one and the other. B'chlal, the general rules of bittul, b'chlal won't apply. Right? Something that's alive is never going to become nullified. So here goes the Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah Psachim that we're speaking about a Korban Pesach. If a Korban Pesach got intermingled, the living animal got mixed with a Bechar, what do we do? So there's a benefit here. What's the Maila here, Aviv? You can shecht it. Like, what's the issue? Shecht it. You can argue. Shecht the animal and let the Kohen say or think, however it works. If this is the Bechar, I'm doing it l'shem mitzvahs b'char. If there's the Korban Pesach, I'm doing it l'shem Pesach. And by the way, the first Mishnah in Zvachim, I know people just moved on to Chulin. Don't forget that this whole thing of shaloi l'shem bailim, shaloi l'shem the right korban, according to many opinions, is only a problem if you had in mind the wrong korban. If you have in mind stam, you can shech the korban stam. So you can either shech the stam, or you can make that stipulation that whichever one it is, it should be l'shem that will be okay.
Can I just make a comment here?
Huh?
Can I just make a comment?
Please.
I don't really see this question. Meaning, we're talking about lachatchila. Can I take mois meiser sheni and use it to buy shvius? And right here, we're talking about a situation where animals got intermingled. It's achala maisa here. Now we got to figure out a solution. So to say that he figured out a solution that the Kohanim could eat it, therefore he would necessarily, you know what I mean? Like, I don't see how they go in the same line.
So you're right that they're different, but you're not right with the following. If we are going to subscribe, Danny, to ein miviim kachim lebeis apsul, then nothing that we're saying now will be accepted. Which is, let me say what Rab Shimon says, then I'll tell you what's self-understood, what the Chachamim argue with, and then I'm going to come back to your question. You're making a good point. It's not you're making a good point, but still. What's the problem that they got mingled? The problem is that if we're going to do the first step, like I mentioned, the shkita is okay, the kavana will be fine, the zrikas adam lechatchila is the same. You're not doing anything, even the diavad here. Elama, now you're going to have an issue. Who's going to eat it? So one way of solving that would be if you say, like we are learning now, Shitas Rab Shimon, that meviim kachim lebeis apsul. You know what you're going to do? You're going to make sure that the minuyim on this should only be kohanim. So you resolve the kohanim part, and you have to treat the meat of both of them kechamur shebahem, and everything will be eaten. The Chachamim who hold that ein meviim kachim lebeis apsul, they won't allow for you to shech the korban. Why not? Because you are opening it up to it possibly becoming ruined. Like as an example, what were to happen if you did not eat it until midnight? Well, if it's a bechor, it wouldn't matter. If it's the Pesach, it would matter. So to say that on both animals, you have to treat both animals as if it's a Pesach, you are limiting. You are opening it up to it becoming invalidated. So Rab Shimon is the one that says that im chaburas kahanim. Listen, if it's not a chabur of kahanim, then you have to deal. We have to know the dinims. Many times you say that you have to wait until it gets blemished, and then you have to redeem it. You have to go through what you do with other kachim that becomes problematic. According to Rab Shimon says, if the chaburas of kahanim, there's no problem. Lachatchila, go do the avodah and yoichlu. Even though yoichlu v'tana Allah, the Braisa clarifies, doesn't mean you can stop eat it. It means yeyachlu kachamar shebahem. Yachlu kachamar means that only kahanim and only until midnight. Now here's the thing. Rab Shimon clearly does not prohibit diminishing the opportunity of its consumers. Why would you, Rabbi Yoina, say that Rab Shimon will put a limit on Shvis? Now, the obvious answer, which we'll leave for tomorrow, it's already late, is same answer that we gave for Truma. Don't forget, we're speaking about Chaburas Koyhanim. We're speaking about eating kachum. I know that. But the Gemara's kasha is a beautiful kasha. The kasha is not going to be on Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi fits. Rabbi Shimon argues across the board. But you, Rabbi Yonah, you are insisting, no, Rabbi Shimon subscribes to a Miviim Kachman Lo Beis Absul. He's only leaning in by Truma, but you see over there, we're not talking about Truma. And he's allowed. Now, I want to just go back to what the Gabbai said. You're right, Danny. You're right. There, when no one is advocating for you to mix up the animals. The point we're just making over there is that the Chachamim hold that even though the step number one is allowed, even though if the Chaburas of Koyhanim, you can make an argument, go through with it. And limit the eating until midnight, the Chachamim hold you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that because what were to happen if you didn't eat it until midnight? What are you going to do now? You're going to burn it? How can you burn it? Maybe it's the Bechar. So don't even go down that road. Stop the process right now and let the animals get blemished, etc. So you see from over here that the Machlekes Rab Shimon isn't only by Truma, it's also by Kachem. That's the Gemara's Kasha, and we'll answer tomorrow the answers that the Gemara will give. Gewaldig.